I thought we would have another little image tour like we had this morning. We'll see. Okay, I need to go back. So inner being is interesting, interdependence, inner being is interesting to us today because it is the basis for compassion. And compassion is the basis for justice. And so here's 3 quotations. We've been looking at part of this quotation from Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander of Thomas Merton, his Epiphany here in Louisville in the late 50s, all week. And the beautiful images of the shining sun, which is all of you, all of us. But this is the other part of, another part of that quotation. I was overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation. So that's interesting. There's a dream that's a background of isolation, of separateness. And this comes as a surprise to Thomas Merton. I think that's interesting to note that. 4 years later, 1963, this is a quotation from one of the great documents of the 20th century, a letter from a Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. All life is interrelated. All are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. This is the interrelated structure of reality. Beautiful, beautiful. Interesting that he had to say it. And then James Lovelock, who came up with the Gaia hypothesis, that started to come to him the next year, in 1964. And this is how one of his expressions of what Gaia meant. The entire range of living matter on Earth, from whales to viruses and from oaks to algae, could be regarded as constituting a single living entity. Again, this is beautiful, and many of us accept this, but it came as a surprise to many people. It was deeply, deeply contested idea as he unfolded it. His book, Gaia, was not published until the beginning of the next decade, but 64 is when he started having this insight by having a view of Earth, as it were, from above, working on material about Mars. So I'd like to explore with you what happened, because before the Renaissance, the view in the West was as it has been in much of the rest of the world, up until even now, and that is that this is true, and that what Martin Luther King Jr. said was true, and that what Thomas Merton experienced as being true was true. So it was a commonplace. It was the worldview. It had variations, but it was absolutely commonplace, so much so that it was not questioned. The world was alive, everything was integrated, everything was interdependent. Somehow, between then and when these statements were made, we lost that, and something happened. So I'm going to use an illustration of how extreme it got before we started to move away. This is the coronation of Napoleon as the Emperor of France, and he hoped the Emperor of the world. This is 1804. This is David's over-the-top painting of this moment. He's crowning himself, typical Napoleon gesture, and 1804, this happened, and if you read Wikipedia, which is, you know, there are problems, but it only mentions this in Napoleon's life in this moment in 1804, but this was also happening. This is the Haitian Revolution. Haiti was a French slave colony, meaning everybody who lived in Haiti was a slave except for the overlords. It was a slave colony, it was a sugar colony, also coffee and other products. And this was the slave population of Haiti defeated Napoleon's army in 1804, decisively. 12 French generals died in that overthrow. It was the first successful slave rebellion since Spartacus in Rome in late antiquity. Why don't we know that? Some people know. I can't really see out there. Just be honest. Raise your hands if you knew this. You're right. Tiny minority. There's more. So the reason that it was the most lucrative sugar slave colony in the Caribbean was because an extreme idea of the denial of interdependence. Mm-hmm. Interdependence was denied in two main ways. One, the earth was dead. It's an inert thing. It's an atomized collection of objects that is available for human use and abuse. And this is a picture currently of the border between Haiti on the left, on your left, and Dominican Republic on your right. This extreme deforestation and the resulting erosion has been going on since 1730 with the overuse of the earth. But there was no problem with that because the earth was simply a dead object to be used. The other non-human object to be used were the slaves. And this is a picture of two children, slave children in New Orleans. In the 19th century, one is dark and one is much lighter skinned, white. And the understanding of humanness, which was a convenience for the use of the people as tools and as objects, went from white equals human to black equals inhuman. So between the objectification of the earth and the objectification of the African origin slaves of Haiti, they worked that island, that half of the island, so severely that they extracted enormous profits from it and destroyed a people until they rose up and proved France and the rest of us to be wrong about their status on the earth. This is why nobody mentioned it and why we don't teach it. Is this was a tremendous affront to the ideas that fueled the wealth of the West. And this is what we got out of it. Napoleon had to recoup his losses, and so all of this vast area of space was sold to Thomas Jefferson to help France recover the losses from Haiti. You may regard this as a Trojan horse because it reinforced new ways. The English colonists had their own ways of objectifying the earth and objectifying people of color, but the ways that had been used in Haiti came in through this former French area, which had 60,000 people living in it at the time of the Louisiana Purchase. 30,000 were black and 30,000 were white. And this was all in the service. This is Turner, the great 19th century English painter. He was obsessed with the Industrial Revolution and steam engines. This is one of his great paintings. And the steam engine amplified our power and made us the gods that we hoped we truly were. And so the use of the resources of the earth to fuel the Industrial Revolution and the enormous profits that it brought pushed this whole idea of interdependence further and further out of sight. But we suffered because of that. We suffered so much as people, all of us, the privileged and those who were on the receiving end of objectification. And we started to make a turn back. And this is one image of that turn back when we could see the earth as a whole. We began to recover. And so those little moments, those glimmers with Merton and with MLK and with James Lovelock were the beginning of what Joanna Macy calls the Great Turning. Mm-hmm. returning back to an idea of interdependence and compassion and justice built on a true understanding of the integrity of the earth and of all that is. So the great turning is not a circle. We're not going to go back to where we were before. We're going to be dragging all the experiences, this is how it is, all the experiences of the past 400 years with us, and we have a few things to look at with consciousness as we make this huge boat turn back towards an understanding of interdependence. I've named a few of them here. What are we going to do about the healing between the peoples? The peoples who have been objectified and those who objectified them. We now see that what we hoped happened in the 60s was a scab on the wounds of our country and our world. We have much to do in consciousness about healing. Population, I needn't say more about that. We have to bring consciousness to what it means eventually, in not the far distant future, to be 9 billion people on the earth, from 7 to 9 billion. Climate change, as I said this morning, this is the long emergency, and the effects of this are for our children and our grandchildren and the generations of the other species, those that survive on the earth. What consciousness are we going to bring to that turning so that it is a spiral that is upward and not downward? And the last one, and this one is one that Owsley keeps reminding me, because of my overemphasis perhaps on climate change, that the folks in Silicon Valley where I live, these folks are deeply concerned more about this than they are about climate change, and that is what they call the technological singularity. And that means that we have become cyborgs, that we are an amalgam of organic, inorganic, human, technological pieces put together and fused. The Z generation, the young people right now who are coming up, are people who are not just digital natives, they are people for whom technology is part of every physical aspect of their lives. We have not asked the questions in a way that we could hold them together about what does this mean morally, ethically, spiritually, humanly. So when we say the earth, we often use the word world, and that's incorrect. The earth is part of the world. The world is more than the earth. This is a picture of the world, the cosmos, in a medieval or an ancient view. And you see that it includes a lot, but it's actually encompassed. You know, it's if you could get up on Mount Olympus or Mount Zion or one of the great mountains, you were close to the top of all this. You were much closer, and above you were the planets, and above that were the stars. Part of what we did in the denial of interdependence and the livingness of the integral world is to rob the cosmos of life as well. So it's not just the earth that's dead, it's those vast reaches reaching out to the stars and the planets. There's nothing there. We've been taught that the universe is like a great machine, and it's winding down, it's dying. And not only that, between here and everywhere else is just very cold, dead, vacuum space. That's what we've been taught. The great turning is going to give us our lives back. This is where we live. This is the Milky Way. And down on the right, about 2/3 out on that arm, that's where the Earth is. It's vast. The universe is unimaginably vaster, and it's not dead. It is full of love. And I'm out of time, so I'm just going to tell you that what we are going to recover in the living way of understanding that the love pervades the earth, the cosmos, and the micro world, and your inner life is a warm universe, and the beautiful faces all shining like the sun. I'll show you those again. Aren't they beautiful? Mm-hmm. And then finally this. And a very quick story, a middle-aged woman in Alabama when I was the bishop there, and I was waxing on about this stuff, and I said the quality of wonder, which Elizabeth, I think, calls awe, is a recognition of the relatedness, in my view, of all of us, and the love that pervades everything, that makes our faces shine, and everyone's face shine with beauty, and makes the stars shine with the same love. And down here, and I said, have you ever had an experience of wonder? I asked this group that, and this woman, who was a friend of mine, said, I've never told this story, but when I was a 4th grader, it was the first time I looked through a microscope, and they had prepared a slide with paramecium, and I saw the paramecium, and I fainted for the beauty of it. All of creation is shining like the sun, which is the love of God. Thank you.
Well, I thought that was a perfect compliment to the first perspective from Elizabeth, and I have a couple of questions. Much of this gathering has been informed by discussions about the need for compassion in a response to the suffering that we've inflicted on humanity through slavery, through abuse of the earth. And part of my question relates to the healing of that suffering. Because I don't know how many people know about this, but I mentioned this morning, I mentioned epigenetics, and how, this is my very quick summary, all living organisms have a constant dynamic interrelationship with their external environment, which impacts on gene expression, and therefore we dynamically have this relationship with the external world. And this impact on us, both positive and negative, can be passed on between generations. And there was an experiment, I think, undertaken by a Harvard professor where he took some mice and he gave them a very strong smell. He then split the mice into 2, and one batch had a mild but not lethal electric shock and the others didn't. And then he bred from them, and then 2 generations later he exposed the grandchildren of the mice that had the shock after the smell, and the ones that hadn't to the smell, and the grandchildren of the mice that had had the shock after the smell became agitated. So the inference arising from that is that if traumas happen to a living organism, there is an intergenerational impact. And this, for me, frames a lot of the discussion which might arise from what you both said, because it introduces the idea of conflict and trauma and healing, but then it begs the question, can we heal it fully? Or is this just an ongoing cycle of events in which we find ourselves, which is relative? Like, I often find myself responding to some difficulty in my life while I'm not in Syria, or something like that. And so I would welcome both your comments on those initial thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I can say something. When we look at the nature of interdependence, we can kind of see the origin, like why did we depart from that view? Right. It has to do with objectifying things or not feeling our connection to things, which is a fully embodied, it's not just an intellectual thing, it's how we feel ourselves, who we are, that we see, in fact, we know our place in the great nature of interdependent expression. I always think, yes, I'm a citizen of a town, I'm a citizen of a nation, I'm a citizen of this dazzling planet, but even more so, I'm a citizen of the great nature of infinite contingency. So what does that mean for me as somebody who wants to respond to the world compassionately? How much efficacy can I have?
What's the answer?
Well, I think, because everything leans, we can only see a little piece of things. We can read patterns, and that's what we do, which they tend to be linear. We want to bring it from this to that. And like this one woman was saying, and I'm so sorry, her last name's Matson Yesterday, I can call her Ms. Matson. My notebook I left over there. What's her name?
Is it Isabel?
Ingrid Madsen said we measure the progress of everything by the result.
Yes.
I thought that's very interesting because in a world where everything leans, there is no final result. The verdict is never out. You know, one thing has reverberating effects. Nothing ever has a final conclusion.
But surely we need to strive.
We do. I'll get there. Yeah. But I think we need to know what we're working with as human beings as a part of this nature. So what it means to me is that we're never in total command. And that's just a fact. We don't know what brought us here, what causes and conditions brought us here. We don't know where things will go. We only see things it depends on where we stand, how we see things. There is no singular right answer to anything. We all know that because as you move about the world, you can see that you might go in with good intentions and sometimes it doesn't pan out, or maybe it pans out later and it doesn't have it doesn't go in a line. It branches out because that's how it works within the nature of interdependence. So in some way, we're not in total command. We only see a little piece of things. The world, therefore, is not a resolvable place. Now, wait, you have to let me finish, because I know this could get you revved up.
I am.
I'll just say one thing. It's a big idea, so I have to finish it and then ask, okay? So when I say the world is not a fixable or resolvable place, I'm not saying it's broken. What I'm saying is it's dynamic. It's too rambunctious for the likes of our ideas. So there's a lot of potentiality in the fact that things are not fixable. So I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying there's too much movement and energy to know. At the same time, yet, because everything leans, everything we do matters. And so we have to try with all our might to respond. And I do feel when we understand who we are in relationship to everything else, it's very alive. And it's very poignant. And you won't be able to not serve. You always go around asking what serves, like all the great beings of this place that we see, all the great saints. So in a way, it's a conundrum. It can be seen as a conundrum if the mind is dualistic. We can't fix it, yet we have to try.
Yes, and there's another aspect to this, it seems to me, which is that if we're coming to the end of the age, and entering a new one, which is informed more honestly about how things really are, which is everything is interconnectedness, then this gives science a huge new challenge, because in truth, you can't just measure things in a reductionist way. You have to measure them systemically. And yet scientists, understandably, the scientist in me wants to understand the world through this new prism of interconnectedness. And you're worrying me with the scale of the relativity of your...
Patrick, I don't think it's the scientist's problem. I think it's our problem with science. They have a very good process. The scientific method is a good method. It's yielded great results. We've given it too much, not just power, we think it's giving us meaning. So science does not give us meaning. That is our job as a human community. So we can see what science is teaching us. We need to see not alternative facts, but facts. And we need to understand that humans are meaning-making people. I want to make a response to the healing question, too. And I want to go back to Haiti. The first pilgrimage that I helped lead in Haiti, we deliberately put it so that we would arrive in Jacmel on the southern coast port at the time of Carnival. It's the oldest carnival in the Western Hemisphere. And as we were driving into the town, there were very fierce-looking young adults who had painted their bodies. They were wearing very little, and they were painted black, they were painted dark blue, they were painted all kinds of grays and whites and other colors, and they were fierce, and they would come up to the windows of the cars that we were in and shake in the windows. And I asked one of the drivers, what are they doing? What is this? And they said, they are consciously inviting the wounded souls of the Native Americans who were enslaved and died, and the black Africans who were enslaved and died, into them so that they might be healed. Wow. So what I took from that was this is very much like the Christian practice of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, when we pray for the dead and we believe the dead are praying for us. This is a living universe that transcends time as well as space. So when I pray for those who have died, what do I think is happening? I think I'm making myself available to God for the healing of that which has been broken in the past. In my own life. It's not a dispassionate thing. It's something personal. And that these young men and young women were doing that with those who had gone before them. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd almost ever seen.
So in order to prepare for the future, we have to repair the past.
In ourselves.
In ourselves.
Because that's where all this is, you see. I mean, it's the nature of interdependence. Part of a Buddhist understanding is that the world that is interdependent out there is also completely present in here. This whole world is in here. And in Christian terms, God as the Trinity, all the angels, all the demons, and the devil himself are all inside. And so the healing starts in the inner realm.
Can I just follow one more thing?
One point, because what I'd like to do in a moment is pause for a film, and then I'd like to invite our special guest up. But please.
Okay, I have a moment to say one thing. You know, you were saying that you want to know what to do, but like this is why I use the sticks. You can't know, because life doesn't lend itself to being known in a determinate way. That's the whole point of this. So it's interesting because we think knowing is capturing truth, but that's not really what knowing is. Truth cannot be captured because everything leans. It all depends. And so, you know, we can't fix the earth from one thing into another thing. That's not what the earth is. It's not a thing. Again, it's a dynamic that can't even be found as
Hold that question.
Okay.
Can we fix the earth? And let's have a discussion about that after the film.
Okay.
So we're ready for the film. Could we see the film? Hopefully.